All right, and welcome to a great episode we have in store for you. As you can see, we've got 5 on the screen today. I'll be hosting, and we've just got an amazing group of guests, including 2 of our co-hosts. So pretty excited about this opportunity. We've got Carlton McCoy, Master Sommelier and CEO of Heights Cellars. Welcome, Carlton.
Great to be here.
We love having you. I love seeing that smiling face. Bobby Stuckey, Master Sommelier and owner of Frasca Hospitality Group. Welcome, Bobby. Love having you. And of course, we have Sabato Sagaria, co-host of the soon-to-be Emmy Award-winning Freerun and CEO, freelancer for hire, free agent, amazing man. And we've got Dustin Wilson, Master Sommelier, owner of Verve Wine in New York and San Francisco. Thanks, everybody, for joining today.
Thanks for having us, Mike.
Of course. So I just can't wait for this. I've been looking forward to this for 2 weeks now. So, we gathered this amazing panel of MSs to talk about the wine industry and what's going on with the CMS right now. Of course, we all know it's been in the news. I see the CMS as the face of the wine industry. I don't know if I'm alone in that, but I certainly do. Really the trigger point and tip of the spear as it goes for the wine industry. And so we wanted to assemble this amazing panel and just talk about what's going on with the CMS right now. We've got a lot of news about certain MSs quitting and just what the direction is and what the response is from the CMS. So I say we just kick things off here, and I'll just throw it to you, Sabato, first. What is going on right now with the CMS, and where are things at?
Great question, and that's a meaty question with lots of different tangents off of it. So it's like Medusa's hair there.
That's right.
So I think first and foremost, I want to say that none of these people on the call are members of the board, and so speaking my personal opinion as we go into this. And I think when you look at any company right now, there's a lot of things that companies are dealing with, and you put COVID on there, and then on top of that, you throw the injustice we're seeing around the country, and that sort of amplifies all the opportunities and need for change, as well as being able to look back. And as we look back, times were different then, and there's also some things that organizations have done that need to say, how can we do better in the future? So I think right now at the court, holding up that mirror and saying, where are the opportunities that we need to do better, and what are the mistakes that we've made that we can learn from?
And when you say, what can we do better? I've heard about this a diversity committee being created and developed. And Carlton, if I'm not mistaken, you're either heading that up or you're a part of that for the CMS. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'm not heading it up. I am a member of the diversity committee, as is Sabato, and really the premise there was, obviously the board acknowledged that within our organization, there were, I'd say the demographics of the court did not reflect the wine industry or the country. So sort of, what do we do about that? And, as they should have done, they said, well, the board, for the most part, is a bunch of white guys, frankly, because that's what most of the Court of Master Sommeliers, most of the wine industry is, frankly. So they said, well, look, we do have some diversity within, the ranks of Master Sommelier. So let's get all these guys together and have them tell us, okay, what are the issues that you see that you've maybe even experienced in the organization, and give us some guidance as to how we can fix it. And they sort of jumped into action, and that was really the premise behind the diversity committee.
But I also think to that point, when I think a lot of folks, and I even had some of these moments in my personal life when you started hearing, and unfortunately as a country, that it took something like George Floyd's death to bring a lot of attention to these things, and force the self-reflection through that process. Said, oh, well, that's everyone else. It's not us, or it's not me. And when you look at it and say, whoa, this is just, testing organization. We got to the point, people passed the test and got to this point. It's how do you, we're not going to institute quotas that say, oh, how do you, just open up the door so we can add more diversity to people that pass the exam? That's not what we need to solve for. It's actually saying, how do we go even further downstream? And it's not just the Court of Master Sommeliers, it's also the wine industry, but saying, what does diversity mean? And it could mean something different today than it does 10 years from now, hopefully, in terms of that we've been able to evolve that. But also it goes down to accessibility and inclusion. I think that's first and foremost what we have to look at and saying, as an organization, how do we make ourselves more accessible to people? And that's underrepresented communities in the BIPOC community, in terms of where we're holding courses, how we're reaching out to them, and then also how do we make them feel included in it or a part of it? And I think diversity is the almost like a byproduct of those, focusing on it. And so it's really looking systematically at our organization, saying where are the opportunities that we can do, because there's not one silver bullet that's going to fix it all overnight. It is a systematic change in our thought process.
I have a question here. Just from the outsider here, having no experience with the CMS other than just working around outside of it, just the overall opinion here is, do you guys think that the CMS is exclusive? And I mean that in opposite to inclusive. I don't mean an exclusive club.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, is it do you think people are excluded from it?
Well, anything luxurious is exclusive by nature, right? So you're excluding a class when you have something that's expensive, right? So if you're a dealership and you're selling Lamborghinis, you're exclusive, right? Because you're excluding 95% of the population that could never afford one, right? Just by nature. And the court was built around, I'd say its roots come from the UK and around the sales and service of really fine luxury wine. So the sort of I'd say the philosophies and the way it presented itself was built around that. We'd already started to phase away from some of that, and that's just my perception. When Jay Fletcher and that regime separated us from the UK, but I don't think it went far enough, because it's not actually super expressive of how Americans interact with wine, even at the high level. And I think it's a natural progression that needs to happen. But does it exclude classes? I'd say, yeah, luxury wine in general does. But that's by design, and that has nothing to do with race. When you're a restaurant or a retail shop or, a company that sells and deals with really fine beverages, really expensive wine, you're going to exclude people. Now, the court wasn't necessarily meant to just deal with luxury wine, but that's sort of how it presented itself.
Bobby, it looks like you want to say something.
Yes, I agree with that, Carlton. Also, I think any activity that gets to a pointy edge at the end because of either effort or energy that it takes or travel that it takes to go through the ranks is going to naturally exclude some people. Look at marathon running. 50,000 people sign up for the New York Marathon. There's people doing 5-hour marathons and they're getting a medal at the end and they feel really good, and that's really inclusive. But at the Olympic trials, when you make the marathon a 2:18 standard to be able to show up at the Olympic trials, even this year was the biggest amount of Americans qualified for the US Olympic trials for the marathon. It was still only a couple hundred, right? So anytime you have these levels of hurdles, you're naturally going to be exclusive. So it needs to be people who have the time, the energy, the motivation, the work setup, the family setup that can allow them to go and the money to go through these standards. And yes, that is tough. And we can find a way to make that easier for some things, but there will naturally always be some inherent hurdles where you see it all the time. The restaurant business is exclusive in the sense some people can't do it because their spouse doesn't want them working at nights anymore. They get worn out. You don't see many 50-year-olds like me on the dining room floor anymore. Is that because it's exclusive? No, it's hurdles have kept people away from that. So I do think there's a lot of exclusivity that we can break down. There will always be some things that we have to work harder on to get more people in.
But do you see it as is there any force keeping people out other than the natural progression of, look, you've got 50,000 people and you're gonna have to work really hard to get to be the one person that, or the few people that, so not exclusive in the sense of you've achieved this goal, but exclusive in the sense that we don't even want you to apply.
No, I don't think so. I think it's,
No,
Because
not
I don't
even
see it
close.
as the latter. Okay.
No.
I think it's
Perfect.
easier than it used to be. I mean, I think 1994, I took my intro. 1994, I took my intro. I started thinking about it in 1992 as a waiter. I committed in 93. There was, I think that year, there was only 3 intro exams in the country. So
Yeah.
I lived in Arizona. I had a choice. I could go to, I think, New York, Chicago, or San Francisco. That's a lot more exclusive
Yeah.
than it is now.
Yeah.
It was really hard to get into the intro. And while it might not be as expensive as it is now, it was still pretty expensive. And I had to fly to San Francisco as a waiter from Flagstaff, Arizona. I remember Greg Harrington sat right in front of me. He's now an MS, but it was hard. There was only 3 chances to take it the whole year for the intro.
And I think also, Mike, you have to look at, what's the conscious and what's the unconscious elements of that, of this. And it's also the perception of it. So, and that's why I think you have to go down to the intros and the outreach and saying, how do you minimize, you can't minimize maybe the time and commitment if you want to get all the way through the entire program. And what you have to put into that and the sacrifice you have to make there. But at the intro, and when you're talking about education, how you can make that more accessible. And if that's where you're doing the courses, if that's who you're partnering with doing those, and realizing that you can't just go to the same place every time and expect diversity to show up there. How do you look in different places? Whether, just like if you're recruiting for a company and saying, I want a more diverse organization, and you look and you see like a whole, a vanilla looking team, chances are you're not fishing in a place that's going to get you that. So how do we find a way that actually opens the doors and makes us accessible as the first part? And then you build the relationships. That's how mentorship starts. And then that's how you feel included. And kind of my path into this, I passed all the way through my advanced. And I was living in West Virginia at the time, in rural West Virginia. So
Were you in Tulsa, West Virginia?
Yeah, it's a suburb. It's a suburb of that.
Those are fake teeth. He had to remove his teeth to get hired.
But so I was the sommelier community in West Virginia. I was, maybe 1 or 2 of us that were studying through. I went and took that exam, and I passed on the first time. And I remember looking around the room, and there were people, and the behaviors I saw said, wow, this is not an organization I want to be a part of. I kind of view like, how do you use your knowledge or your platform for good, not for evil? And by saying that, I say evil is just for yourself, good is for the benefit of yourself, your team, your company, the community, the industry. And I was turned off from that. And so I said, I don't want to go through that anymore. And I sort of hung up my hat. I went to Aspen, and that's when I was at the Nell, and Jay Fletcher, who was the president of the Court of Master Sommeliers, lived in Aspen, and said, hey, I saw you passed your exam, and there's a community of folks that are studying. You should go for the masters. And I'd never been a part of that community. And I saw what it was like to be included there. I felt excluded before to some degree. And then I saw what it was like to be in a place where I felt included. And I wouldn't have been able to, Jay made it accessible, and that team made it feel inclusive. And that's when, as we were there over the 6 years, I think 5 people went on to pass the MS, but there was a community there. It was probably exclusive for a lot of folks, and there were hurdles to get there, but it's being able to be in the right place to open up the doors to as many people at the entry. Because if you don't get people involved in the intro or even excited about wine, then it's not going to result in a more diverse master sommeliers or wine professionals in general. It doesn't matter if you have a pin or not.
And we've talked about when you're kind of, maybe you already know that the court even exists. How do you, from a grassroots perspective, how do you even show people that we exist? This is actually a thing. There are educational tools. Not only that, how do you show people about wine? I don't think I really got into wine until my early 20s, and even that I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, I think
I didn't even know the court was a thing.
That's a big thing, Mike, because I think that may even be more important than what Sabato mentioned about location, because like, a lot of the exams are in inner cities. There where people, Black people live and exist. But the problem is like there's two things: how you project yourself into marketing yourself in a way that it's like you actually want to be included. Like looking at those platforms and influencers, Black influencers, and saying, hey, look, how do we partner to get the word out in the community? And that's just taking a special effort. And I don't think that's the fault of any particular company. It's a wake up call and saying, shit, like that, like that's an actual outlet for us. Like, how do I reach out to these like 20 Black influencers? Okay, hey, look, we'll even pay you guys to market us, but we want more people from your community in our world who actually are having interest in it, right? It doesn't mean that you have to go down that route, but we'd love you to be a part of the organization, or at least make sure you feel welcome. And that's a wake-up call to all of us in general. And how do you find out about the court? I mean, one thing that has to be said is the Court of Master Sommeliers is not for everyone. It's not the journey for everyone. And you can have an incredibly successful career in the wine industry without a Court of Master Sommeliers, right? It takes a certain type of person, a personality. I mean, if you look at the group of people who've passed this exam, there's a couple consistent themes in their personality and their drive and the way they are.
Their hair.
Correct. It doesn't mean that like they're people who know more about wine than I do, who have never touched a Court of Master Sommeliers course, right? About certain things. But that was their journey and they took their journey. I think it's about people who just find your journey and go down that path, because the court is not for everyone. And for some reason, I think people are somewhat intimidated by it or threatened by it. Like no one from the Court of Master Sommeliers ever said, this is the only route. If you want to be a great sommelier, you have to be a master sommelier. I've never said that. I've never heard anyone say that, but I think it's perceived that way. Like that's the only option. Like if you're not doing that, then you can't be successful. And I that's a falsehood. I think for the right person, like for me, it was very important for me and how I progressed through this industry. It actually gave me access to other parts of the industry that I wouldn't have had, right? Like, I got to Little Nell through Dustin and Sabato. Only reason I met them was I met Dustin at the advanced exam. Sabato I met through actually through a trip that was offered me through someone else I met at an exam. Like it actually brought me into the network, right? It was actually an even playing field for me because, while I'm not super dark and, I still look like an international minority, you don't know what I am. I come from a poor family. I don't know how to enter the wine industry, even if I'm passionate about it. So the court gave me, look, I know what, I can pay for this exam and I'm now a part of the court. I can go in, I can pass my intro, and now I'm a part of that network. So if anything, it actually gave me a way into the industry. But to your point, Mike, I think the court needs to do a much better job of looking at those demographics within the country that may not be exposed to the Court of Master Sommeliers or hasn't felt like they're welcome, and make it very clear that they're welcomed and help support them.
You know what's interesting, Carlton? Such a great point. If you look at like where the exams are held, like think about, and I know Sabato, you went to Cornell, so that's a very exclusive game. But if you look at a lot of these community college culinary programs, or like I went to Northern Arizona University, a state school that has a strong hotel restaurant management program with a very high first generation college. It has one of the highest first generation college students body in HRM. So I'm an alum there, and I always thought, man, that's where we should teach MS classes. You've got a lot of people, a lot of Native American people from the Navajo Nation, Hopi Reservation. That's where they go. You've got a lot of first generation college students. That's where you should be doing an intro exam, because then all of a sudden there's a 21-year-old senior at a university. There's a high percentage of first generation college students there. Then all of a sudden you're opening up a whole journey to someone that doesn't even know it exists. As you said, how do you get into that? And maybe that's something that the board looks at as they pick 10 classes a year at universities or junior colleges that are based on first generation college students in the culinary arts. I mean, that would be a game changer.
Mhm.
But also, I think to that point, we're talking about the Court of MS, the Court of Master Sommeliers, but it's also a part of a larger issue, and that's the wine industry. And if you talk about, if we focus at the court on how we can make the intro and education more accessible, doing it at universities, as Bobby said, doing it at Black universities, at Spelman, at Howard, and partnering with them that have great business schools. Maybe that's the intro for someone into the industry that gives them, wow, I was in marketing or I was in finance, and now I could actually apply that to any industry. But now I know something about the wine industry and I'm excited about it. You've opened the door for them, and that becomes a common bridge, that dot that then connects with them having a conversation with someone like Carlton or someone that works at a winery. And so it's not saying that the end result has to be being a master sommelier, but how you can just get people excited about the wine industry and feel that the whole industry is one that they can see themselves in.
I would definitely teach the intro for Howard Homecoming for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, that's where a lot of the I think the conversation could possibly go is, yes, the Court of Master Sommeliers could certainly do more to market themselves a little bit better. I think to a more diverse community. I think we've in the past always kind of made the focus on the MSs themselves, but I think if you look at the demographic of people that are taking the intros nowadays, they are much more diverse. So I think if we kind of showcase that a little bit more, that'd be a really interesting way to kind of market the organization. The accessibility factor, I think, is a really big thing, like whether it's where you do it. And I think there's also the hurdles of the expense, right? Yeah. So if there's a way to, make it more affordable for people, whether that's through scholarships or through sponsorship of some sort or whatever the case may be, make that barrier to entry from a cost perspective a little bit lower. And also doing them in other places where you might see a more diverse demographic. But I think the broader topic too is just the wine industry at large. I mean, I think the wine industry at large, wine consumers, I think if you look at it on the demographics of the normal wine consumers, predominantly white. And we got to start asking questions about why is that, right? Like, why is it that way? And I think, if you look at the way that wine in general is marketed, it's also heavily marketed to a white crowd. Like, you don't really see it being the type of marketing that happens when you're, at least what I see when it comes to wine, when you market to the Black community, it kind of riffs off of really kind of old bad stereotype types of marketing. And I think that needs to be a little bit more inclusive on the first end, because if you don't have a community of people that are even interested in wine to begin with, it's going to make it really hard for them to want to get involved in a wine organization in the first place, right? So you kind of have to
see themselves interacting with that product.
Yeah, you have to make sure that the wine industry at large has a lot of work to do too on that end to get people of more diverse backgrounds interested in wine to begin with. And then I think, inevitably you'll start to see people funneling to the court, and the court has its own work to do. Yeah. But I think it's a part of a larger issue in the wine industry that I don't think the court fully needs to bear all of that weight.
No, and I think we also, as an industry and as an organization, it's very easy for us to get defensive, but you're also looking at 3 white MSs on here, and we can look at it through one lens, but ultimately, who are the people that feel you're not an MS, Mike? And
I'm looking at 4 MSs.
Yes, we are. But I was saying about
3.5.
I thought you said 4 MSs. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But to the
I'll
point
edit
of
that
saying, we're seeing it from our standpoint. That yes, we made it through for some manner, but what are the obstacles that actually held other people back or turned them off? And be open to that. And it's not in a attacking way, but in just a way of saying, I'm raising my hand. I'm on the diversity committee, and I wanted to be on there to make a change, but also means being able to listen and hearing from people. What can we do? I definitely don't have all the answers, but I want to, if we can use our platform to enable others to help open up those doors or to make it more accessible, that's how I feel we can contribute to it. We can't see all the issues. And if we think that they're not there because we can't see them, that's naive on our part.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think the court right now has a real opportunity in front of it, actually, to, if we do it right, we turn things around. It can really be a great kind of benchmark or a standard bearer on how to kind of move forward as we get past this point.
Yeah, I mean, I look at you guys, and you guys are, absolutely successful, and I can guarantee you there were points in your career as you progress where it was clear that people held you to a different standard that you perceived them holding you to, or saw you in a very different light, or maybe at a higher level than you probably saw yourself. And I think the court is dealing with that right now, where I saw very clearly, we're taught the company line of the Court of Master Sommeliers is an examining body, right? Like that's what we taught from the very beginning. And it's very, and that's at the core of it, that's sort of like the function of it, but that doesn't mean
That's an excuse.
that's what it has to be. But I think that's also, I think that people look to the court for more than that, and it's time to fulfill that, and say, what, first of all, what an honor, right? To be able to do that. Because I think we're all the type of guys who sort of like to step up to a challenge. But you go, well, wow, like this, they're looking to us for guidance, not to be in the back seat going, look, we just give tests, right? Like, then if that's
100%.
the case, then how do you like turn in rapid mode and get to the front of the pack and go, okay, well, we're an organization filled with leaders, people who are leading companies and whole organizations. Like we know how to do that, right? So, how do we step forward and become those leaders, and then redefine even what the Court of Master Sommeliers is, in its core functions,
And when it started, it wasn't educational. It was just, it was just a testing organization. That was it, an accreditation organization. But times have changed. Like this used to be just a phone. Now, what can you do on your phone?
Sure.
And so, if we want to actually be leading the industry, what do we aspire to be? And I've got no problem, whether it's in personal or professional life, or in this organization, to be held to a higher standard. I accept that, and that's what we should ask for.
This is a good point, because I wanted to get into it a little bit earlier when you were talking about the intro exam. Like we're putting intro exams all around the country in diverse areas and inner cities, but who knows that they're there unless you've like signed up and you knew that you needed to go do this thing, or that you even wanted to go do this thing. And I would look at it and say, and I have looked at it here in Denver many times and said, I don't have time for a 2-day exam. Like I want to go learn about wine, or I want to go do this. And that would be me saying, and I'm very interested in wine. Imagine somebody else saying, I'm going to pay to go be tested and judged by others about something I really don't know much about, but I want to learn. It's kind of off-putting. But if the point of the CMS is an examining body, I think that helps that understanding. I mean, frankly, that helps me understand that, we are just here to administer tests. But if you could come out and say, there's no exam. If you want to, we got a platform for that. But we're going to come to your city and we're just going to teach you about wine.
But I don't buy that. I don't buy the hiding behind the education. We're an examination body because we teach at the intro level. We do deductive tasting classes for people. We have an advanced course that goes along with it. And now we're doing online tasting courses. So I think with that comes education, and with that education comes a responsibility that's different than just saying, I'm just an examination body.
But also it's community. I mean, look, the reality is, what kept me going through the court was, as I've done through my entire career, is seeing successful people that you admire and trying to like hitch yourself to them and spend time around them and learning from them and having them drive you. That I think there needs to be more of a community built around not just the master sommeliers, but around, advanced level sommeliers and certified level sommeliers and introductory sommeliers, because that does stand for something, right? And what does that mean to build more of a community outside of just, okay, you just show up for your test or your class and then you just go away? Because I think one of the most beautiful things about our industry is that community factor, like the people who become lifelong friends, right? Like everyone on this call, I pretty much met through the wine industry, right? We had no other reason to cross paths. We met because we had a common interest, which was wine. And in its purest form, that is what really the whole purpose is about. It's like nothing about us said, we're either going to connect or not connect because of where we came from, economically, where our families were, geographically, race, religion, anything. It was like, we're into wine, we're going to connect over that. And I think there's an opportunity for the court to be the bearer of that community and build that out. And not just be inclusive of people who are going through the court, right? Like, how about people who, go, you know what, actually, I don't be a master sommelier. I have no interest in it, but, I'm going through this path, or I own a retail shop. How do you bring them in for accessory education, right? Like, you can bring in the guy who owns, obviously, you're a bad example, Dustin, because you're a master sommelier, but owns like 3 or 4 really successful retail shops, and go, hey, how about this guy come in and do a webinar on what it means in the retail world today, and like build that community outside of just what we know, and build that forum. Because to me, that becomes when you're the leader of it, and also now pushing for what happens in the industry outside of just education and testing.
Now, do you guys?
If I just want
Go
to,
ahead.
one thing, Mike, it kind of goes back to, remember when Charles Barkley said, I'm not a role model? Well, whether you like it or not, you're a role model. And I think that's something that if we're, as you look at everyone on this call and within the CMS organization, the CMS is just one thing that we do. And so while we're trying to change the CMS, we also have an opportunity, and I think an obligation, to also impact change in our industry as a whole. So I think you can impact change in both of those. Just think about the people you mentor, the people that you're around, the people that you're leading in your team. Don't just say, oh, let's focus on changing the court. Let's look at how we change the industry. And it could be giving somebody their first job, or inviting somebody to do, a BIPOC person to help do inventory one day, and opening up those doors. So instead of making them climb over the wall, how do you open up the door and help them come right in?
And that's what I'm wondering, guys. Do you think that it would diminish the court, or diminish your position within the court, perhaps, if the court was open, or there was some type of a organization that was open to even people like me that said, look, I'm never going to take an exam, but I want to be a part of the organization, and I want to be a member of the club because I'm interested in having access to these resources, or I'm interested in helping the industry. Could you have I think now that's the intro level that you would say, it's like, everyone come on in. All you have to do is get this yellow pin on a weekend and you're in. But is there even a level where it's like, hey, I might never even do that, but I still want to be a part of the industry. I still want to work at restaurants and say that I'm a part of this group. Do you think that that's even a potential?
Sure. I think right now, and this is how I run the companies I run here, is nothing's off the table. And I think we have to approach it that way, because if we don't, we're the same organization. Right now, we need to embody a culture of open-mindedness and forward thinking. Right, like my company makes fun of me because I run everything on a wire dry erase board, and I do that because I'm just writing stuff all the time, and I have 2 of them in my office. I'm writing ideas. People come through, write ideas. Like think of the craziest, biggest idea you can think of, and that's what we're going to go towards, right? And I think nothing's off the table. Like, why can't the court be the place where you log in and there's pre-recorded classes of Bobby Stuckey teaching the class on Freerun? Who better to teach that class, right? And it's pre-recorded. And if you're a housewife and you're learning about wine, and guess what? You went to Verve and you got an incredible bottle of Freerun, you're like, I want to learn more about this. Why can't I? That's what I'm saying. Like, why can't I go and go to, to Court of Master Sommeliers and log in, pay for my Freerun class and learn about it? Why can't we do that, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have to think really abstract to evolve the organization, right? And I think we haven't done that. The wines don't change, right? We always talk about trends, but Chateau Petrus is Chateau Petrus, right? It's always going to be. But how we interact with Chateau Petrus changes over time. As a country, we're constantly evolving, and it's how we project ourselves. Like, right? Like, I hate putting on the tie with the little Bacchus thing on it. It's really silly. I don't dress like that. So do we have to wear that? Are we actually, are we an example of what's happening in fine wine beverage in the industry today versus 1975, right? So constantly building a culture of constant evolution, but staying true to like core values and qualities is important. So I'd say, I think everything should be on the table.
Yeah. I mean, we do need to, and I do think that, the one thing is most of the people there are volunteers, and how much time do people have to invest and to do that? Volunteering's hard. Volunteering takes an effort, and we need to redirect some of those funds to be able to do these great. I think they're awesome ideas too, and I hope that whoever is running the organization finds a way to do that.
And you know, I think there's a good segue into you know, where does CMS industry go and the industry go from here? And Dustin, something I want to ask you is, you know, you've had a big part of the Somm movie film series that highlights, you know, and really really dives into the CMS. And so do you feel personally, I'll just put you on the spot, some type of personal responsibility as being in a large way the younger face of the organization through those movies? Do you feel a responsibility to help lead that charge?
Well, first, thank you for calling me the younger face. I appreciate that. You know,
I know what's
State
coming
of
next.
mind. It's a state of mind.
I know what's coming next. Yep.
I would say my short answer to that is yes. You know, kind of what Sabato said, I think really rings true, and probably on an individual level for all of us, as well as the organization. It's like, whether we like it or not, we're role models, you know, I think. And you know, when you get, you know, the opportunity to be kind of put up onto a big platform like those movies, and have that kind of exposure, I think it even accelerates that and enhances that. So I think absolutely. And I think, you know, part of the reason why I've been a little kind of publicly critical of the organization from time to time is just because of that. You know, I know people pay attention, and I think, you know, part of my problems, I guess, or the things that I've wanted to critique about the organization was just kind of a little bit more of a myopic view on kind of what things were going on. So I think, you know, Carlton really touched on it well when he said we should have everything on the table. And I think the focus in the past has been so much just on the exam and keeping everything else at bay. I think when we think about who belongs in this organization as well, or who's a member of the organization, I think technically speaking, right, it's the Master Sommeliers. It's people that have already passed and paid their dues and are up to speed on that, and have not resigned. But you know, you talk to a person that's passed their certified test, certainly a person that's passed their advanced exam, and probably even a lot of people who have taken the intro and passed that exam, and you ask them, hey, are you a part of the Court of Master Sommeliers? Their answer is going to be yes. You know, they think that they are. And I think that, you know, where we need to kind of wake up a little bit as an organization is realize that, like, we all have a lot more responsibility to the industry and the people that have committed themselves to our organization, you know, to do a little bit better of a job for them. So I think, you know, as much as this kind of whole situation has been a little painful, I think that moment is kind of happening to the organizations. They are waking up a bit and saying, like, wow, you know, we are a lot more than just an examining body, whether we like it or not, right? So, you know, I think, me personally, I certainly feel that, and I take that to heart, and I think the organization is starting to do that as well.
Are there other organizations that run in tandem with CMS that maybe are equally positioned or similarly positioned to help the industry? And that may be a no. I'm just wondering, are there other organizations that can bear the brunt of this or can help in this as well?
I think every organization can. I don't think you can look to just one, because as I think a number of people have said on this call, Court of Master Sommeliers is not the end all be all of defining whether you're a great wine professional or not. And everyone has a chance to reach a different audience. And if just think about if everybody had that mindset that said, how can I use my platform to be more accessible, more inclusive, and put out that olive branch for someone, and take a bet on somebody. Somebody took a bet on each one of us.
Yeah.
How can we do that with somebody? How high that tide would rise.
Yeah, but you look at like go ahead. You can go ahead, Bobby.
You know, I think we also want to look at not just us, but everyone out there working in wine, what they want and what they expect. So I'm 50 years old, 1994 when I took my intro.
You just passed last year, didn't you, Bobby?
Yeah, exactly. My intro in 1994, but really, it's hard to believe this. And I tell my young employees this, they would never think this. You would never tell your girlfriend's parents that you wanted to be in the restaurant industry in the early 90s. It was a blue collar, industry. That's it. It was not respected. And now I'll get a call from a parent that will say, hey, my son's got a gap year from Yale. Can they observe in the restaurant business? That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is so great. That is non-existent when I began the journey. So we have a generation now that, look, they want a 401k, they want insurance, they want to be treated like a profession. And I want that for our industry more than anybody. Like one of the first things I did, Dustin worked for me. I had a 401k, I had insurance for my staff. That's really, really important to me. And the industry wants that, the people that are the young employees, but we don't have a breadth of certifying boards. So like if I'm hiring for an accountant, I know that they've got this diploma, and I can say, oh, they went to this university or they went to this university. Great, they're ready to be my CPA. Or if you're, whatever the professional world is, we don't have that. The closest thing we have is a couple of organizations, and they can all look different. Just like if I want to hire someone from a liberal arts school to do something, or I want to hire someone who went to RISD for design, you can do that. But in our profession, we're so new at being a profession that I can't go out and hire someone as a sommelier and know that they know how to run the books, run the numbers, take care of guests, inspire employees, do all these things with just looking at a resume. You need to really delve in. And we all know wine professionals that have tanked businesses because they didn't have the right skill set. And there was not a way to ascertain if that wine professional was truly a wine professional. And we all know restaurants that had problems with that. And I hope we can get to a point where people can say, I want my cake and eat it too. I want to be a professional, and I'm going to go find out the skill sets to be a professional. And
I think we were talking about Somm earlier, and Somm was a fluke. I don't think Jason or anyone would have predicted the attention it would have drawn to our industry or our profession, but it did. And so it made it accessible to people. So what if we took, instead of relying on the next fluke to come along and make it more accessible to folks, what if you strategically said, I want to make it more accessible to people. How can I do that? And a different type of people, one that people can actually see themselves a part of. I think that's a challenge that we could take and look at all the great things that might come out of that. If we were to channel it in that strategic.
Yeah, I think, Carlton loves to talk about legacy. And I thought that was when he was at the Nell, that was something that really inspired me, that he was really focused on, was kind of what's the legacy that he's leaving behind. And not to embarrass you, Carlton, but, the Court of Master Sommeliers has the opportunity to create some sort of legacy in the long term too, right? Like I think it's done that to a certain extent already with really raising the bar. If you look at the level of wine education in the restaurant community and the sommelier community, it's already done a really great job at raising the bar there, right? And I'm sure Bobby, as the elder statesman on the call, you can probably attest that like over your tenure in the restaurant business, the sommeliers have come a long way in their level of knowledge in the last 15, 20 years. But now maybe the focus is a little bit different, right? Now maybe the focus is how do we really bring more professionals from all different backgrounds into this industry and give them the tools they need to succeed, so that we can leave a different mark on the industry over the next decade or so.
Carlton, I have a question for you. You are in a unique position as the CEO of an extremely well-respected vineyard and winery operation in Napa. Where is in your hiring and you bringing in folks into your company and then just overall into the industry from the supplier perspective, what are the differences there between through hiring in the restaurant industry and coming up through the wine industry there? Because they're different. You might reach the same point, but they're different towers to get there. I see
Sure,
Napa
sure.
as just like a fantasy land of amazing wine, but the reality is, I mean, it's a working community of farmers and businesses. I mean, how do you get folks involved at that level to get to where you're at?
Yeah, I mean, it is. So, I mean, they're two different worlds. The farming side and the winemaking side, they're actually, unfortunately, in the Napa Valley, they are very separate. In most regions in the world, they're sort of one and the same, but they're separate here. The farming businesses here in the Napa Valley are, for the most part, really run by like 5 big farming companies that farm tons of acreage. And there's the rare occasion of a small estate that actually does their own farming. And the employees for those companies are almost all Latin American, about 99.99% of them. And sometimes they're big families that know each other and they go from one company to another, sort of thing. But that business, for the most part, is almost exclusive to Latin American employees. The owners are rarely Latin American. Those are all white males, as you can imagine, that own those companies. And most of those companies are multi-generational. For instance, Jack Neal and Son, that, you know, we own 515 acres for the Lawrence family vineyards, and Jack Neal and Sons farms all 500, but we've been working with them for 3 generations now, you know, previously with the Heights family. So that is a bit of a monopoly in a sense, culturally. Winemaking is sort of also a bit of an issue. You know, when you look at winemakers here, if you're going to, you know, even apply for the pedigree of winemaking position that we're going to be posting or discussing, like, you've got to have quite a bit of experience, right? You know, we're not hiring winemakers that are fresh out of UC Davis or saying, you know what, I really just want to get into winemaking. So the barrier of entry here is really, really difficult. Now, with that said, winemaking is one of the few parts of the wine industry aspects that you can start with 0 education as a cellar worker and work your way up and learn it pretty quickly. Within years, you could be an assistant winemaker somewhere. But again, culturally, there's that barrier of like, is that a thing that Black people do, right? Become winemakers? It's a very odd thing, right? It's not a job that we tend to associate with our community, which we're obviously trying to change. I had a really great conversation with someone about 2 days ago when they were saying that's where the biggest opportunity, because I think we're already seeing, obviously, people of color as sommeliers and distributors and things like that. There's momentum there, but there's very little momentum as far as like filling cellars with people of color. And you know, when we're hiring, obviously, you know, we need to get people who have a lot of experience. There's a lot riding on anything that we're doing, so it's always the best person for the job, sort of thing. And where you're at a disadvantage if you're just starting as a person of color, it takes years to master that craft. You got to travel, you got to work at, you know, various regions and pick up those skills. It takes a long time. Especially if you went to school. Now you're adding education on top of it and cost on top of it. UC Davis is not an inexpensive school to go to for the enology program.
And Dustin, in the retail world, again, different from restaurants, the retail world, what is, you know, same kind of question to you is, you know, the different, it seems like, you know, you have a few folks working in a retail shop versus dozens or if not hundreds in a restaurant. You know, where do you source from to get, you know, the diversity that you desire to have throughout your organization?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we just go broad with our job postings, and you know, we sift through people just like anybody else does. I think what's a little bit more unique about us is our location, right? We're in metropolitan areas that already have a pretty diverse mix of people in that locale. And you know, you don't need a tremendous amount of you know, specific experience or knowledge level to be able to join the team. You know, you got to have a great personality and somebody that we, you know, believe will take good care of guests when they walk through the door, and you know, at least a working base knowledge of wine. But you know, we can teach you a lot when it comes to the producers that we work with and things like that. So, you know, I think our barrier to entry is fairly low, and we exist in communities where there's already a pretty diverse demographic. So, you know, I think for us, it's, you know, we just make things accessible from the start, and part of that just has to do with where we're located. And then everything else kind of happens naturally after that. So, you know, I'm pretty proud, we've got actually a really diverse mix of people that are working for us, like kind of across the board. So, you know, really happy with that. But I think if we were in a different place, that might be a totally different story. So I think
Yeah.
certainly location has a lot to do with it.
And you know, this whole conversation and the entire you know, the attention to this, you know, important issue has come along at a time where we have another massive crisis, which has absolutely just decimated all of your industries and ruined, in many respects, for a long time, the opportunity for newcomers to join the team, and the jobs aren't there. How, you know, this question's for everybody. How do, you know, right now, if you're saying this is my time, I really want to jump into the industry, well, there's no landing spots. I mean, what do people do right now? You know, if you want to be in it, what do you do right now? Don't all jump on it at one time.
Well,
Please
I'll say
don't.
from our side, you know, we're always hiring interns because, you know, one thing that's a reality with us is that grapes don't stop growing because the economy's down or there's a pandemic, right? So that's going to happen. We're going to harvest anyway. We have to make investments now for, you know, revenue that we won't realize in 3 or 4 years, sometimes 5 years. So we have to make that investment now. And it's been obviously a very difficult year for cash flow for us because all those investments that we wanted to make, you pretty much cut all of them out because you need to cover payroll for production. You need to, you know, obviously you got a PPP loan, but it was like, you know, teeny in comparison to the workforce we have and the farming costs and things like that. So, but we still need to bring those people in. So, you know, being a seller intern is probably the easiest way in, but it's not a very high paying job. And obviously, you know, you're in the middle of the Napa Valley, so you're commuting from somewhere. You know, trying to find housing in St. Helena or Napa, it's super expensive. So maybe you're having to drive from Vallejo, you're driving an hour and a half to be at work at, you know, 6:30 in the morning, right? It's really difficult. And just like anything else, like you sort of got to be willing to sacrifice a ton in the beginning to get the reward at the end. But that's for us where the opportunity lies right now. We're not hiring a lot of positions on the high level for obvious reasons, but the entry level positions still need to be filled.
I think it's also, though, you know, in terms of mentorship is another way, or even just, you know, looking out there and saying, okay, what are the jobs that I aspire to, and how can I just talk with those folks and understand how they got there, what they did, and use that to sort of Mr. Potato Head your own idea of what you want to do, and then look at how you can diversify your skill set to better prepare you for that when that opportunity does come along. And I think that's one thing that builds networks, relationships, and you're always interviewing for your next job, whether you know it or not. So you never know who's on the other end of that call. And if I remember when I first met Bobby, I never thought that I would be working at the Little Nell, but here we are. And likewise with these gentlemen. So I think it's, you never know, and tap into the expertise that's out there.
A lot of times, like going to the right restaurant that has the great program that you want to be involved in, and taking even the lowest position job that you can get. I mean, I started at Per Se at the lowest position. I started at Citizen at the lowest position. I kept going back to the bottom just to be in the right place, improving myself and moving up quickly. In most restaurants, you can move up fairly quickly if you're ambitious and you're smart. And just being in that company where there is a wine community. And I hate to say it, I'm not just being a cheerleader for the court, but if you're in a restaurant that has a really strong Court of Master Sommeliers community within it, and you're willing to do the work and you get into that community, like they can help catapult you through your career pretty quickly as long as you're committed. So I'd say finding the right restaurant, even if it's a position that you feel like you're overqualified for, just getting in the right place can really help.
Bobby, I'd like to ask you that too. I mean, you have multiple restaurants. I mean, in this current market, if somebody comes to you, I know you can't speak to specifics because it hasn't happened, but, how do you help, or what advice do you give to folks looking to get into or are already in the industry and looking for, fine dining or even medium level dining with wine jobs that just aren't there yet? What should they be doing?
Well, first of all, we should look at the whole ecosystem and realize it wasn't always as good as it was last year. And realize, hey, that was a special moment and things have changed. It's okay, we have to rebuild. I mean, I think about when I got my job at the Nell, the reason I went to the Little Nell for my job as the assistant wine guy was it was the closest job I could get from Phoenix, Arizona. There was not another assistant wine job closer. I didn't want to move to Aspen. I'm very lucky that I did. I loved it. back then, there were so few wine jobs. So I think as an industry, we got so spoiled that we would go from a waiter to a assistant somm like that.
Yeah.
That might change now for a moment.
Yeah.
I don't want people to get discouraged. It might actually be really good for our industry to get people to be retooled. Look, we have someone tonight. We have someone staging tonight. It's the middle of COVID pandemic, and someone's interviewing for a job right now. And so there are jobs out there, but going back to what Carlton said, the thing that is uncomfortable for people right now is we have a whole socio mindset now that we want everything in quickly. We want to go to the top in 18 months. We want an abbreviated MBA program. We want to get abbreviated culinary program, whatever it is. And look, the craft of hospitality takes time. So this is a moment to go find the restaurant that inspires you. And as Carlton said, maybe start where it's at the beginning and grow through that system so you have all the skill sets to be great. Being great is awesome.
I agree.
No one's saying, hey, I want to be average. Now, if you want to be average, that's fine. But if you want to be great, this is the time to start to do those things. And it takes some time. And I know that really frustrates people to hear that. But this is probably, believe it or not, the best time to retool your skill set and your toolbox and go find a restaurant because people still need people and do that. But no, I think for a while, we're not going to have, oh my God, hiring wine people all over the place with not much experience like we were 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I mean, from speaking from personal experience, I was working as a waiter. I was making, had a pretty lucrative waiter job back in Maryland before I moved to Colorado, and took a pretty substantial pay cut to go work for the old Stuckenstein here, and started out as an expediter. I was like scrubbing toilets and emptying trash cans and cleaning the kitchen floor at the end of the night. And, I was happy to do it because I knew I was in a place where, I would learn something and there was going to be opportunity further down the line. I think, I get a lot of people that come to me and ask me like how they progress through the industry. And I always tell them the same thing. It's like, find some place that has either a great mentor or a great restaurant with a good program and somebody that can teach you, and just be willing to do any job. Just put your head down and work. I think a lot of the problem is that you see a lot of people that don't want to work. They just want to try to figure out the quick way to accelerate through.
It doesn't exist.
It's not the way it works.
Not.
Like, I think everybody on this call right now can probably tell stories about how we just stuck our head down and, ran through the mud for a long time before we got to the other side.
It's like a service elevator. You sort of got to go through one floor at a time. No, but I talked to my employees when I was at the Nell about this, because as you can imagine, people who come to Aspen to work are not coming to work hard typically. It's like I moved to Aspen for a season because I want to ski, I want to enjoy myself, and I go, well, to Bobby's story, nothing great ever happened from a mediocre effort. I'm sorry, like I understand there's 2 feet of fresh powder, but you don't get to go ski because we're studying Germany right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we have a tasting group, and I know it's your day off, it is a powder day, but like how bad do you want something, right? And for me, and going back to the Court of Master Sommeliers, why it helped me was I needed that structure for myself, to force myself to study, to get that knowledge I needed. And I wasn't, the way my mind works, I wasn't just studying facts. I wasn't a flashcard guy. I was in the books. I was trying to get a full understanding of this region. When I could save up the money as a server, I took my first international trips to wine regions. That's what I used my vacation time and my savings for. I invested in myself. What most people would think is insane. I didn't go for a beach vacation, I don't think, until I passed masters, right, as an adult. I was in Germany in the middle of the fall, freezing like crazy and just being in these cellars, but I was learning, and I loved it because I knew that no one where I came from had those opportunities, and I took advantage of it. And I would come back and work the crazy hours. And I mean, it's grueling, but you start to love it because, one, you say, I actually have the opportunity to work towards something, which most people don't. The Court of Master Sommeliers gave me the structure and the guidance and the community I needed. And sure, when I looked around, I didn't see a lot of people like me in the room, but they all were very welcoming to me, incredibly welcoming. I wouldn't be here without, various people that were either already master sommeliers or working towards being master sommeliers that took me into their, community and pushed me forward. And I like that environment. It's the reason why I like cycling and running, and, I like working hard. I like challenging myself. And that really is the personality type I think that it takes to be successful in the Court of Master Sommeliers, not just to be a master sommelier, but to even pass the certified, right? It's not an easy exam to pass, right? It is difficult. And the advanced exam is super, super difficult. And the master's is almost unpassable. So, we can't look at it and go, well, if you haven't passed the master's, you haven't achieved anything. If you've passed the advanced level, exam, that is a massive achievement, right? It's very, very difficult. But you've got to want to strive towards something. You got to want to stay focused. It's not a part-time commitment, right? People somehow they expect to put part-time hours in, but go in and like crush it these exams. And also outside of the passing exam, they want to do a part-time commitment, but learn everything that's necessary to be incredible at your craft, right? It just doesn't work that way, right? Ask a chef, right? If you haven't spent the hours, doing the terrines and the pâtés and the roulades and the stocks, how can you be expected to make that dish properly? Like, you just couldn't. You can't even fake it. And I think that there is, unfortunately, a very big anti-establishment movement, not just in the wine community, in a lot of communities, that isn't really championing education, right? In knowledge in wine. And I think that needs to come back. And I think that the Court of Master Sommeliers can lead that, but we've got to change the way we look, the way we sound, the way we present ourselves. And it's for the good of the industry, not just for the court. Because I think right now, the industry needs that, right? There's a lot of really young, super passionate, super driven sommeliers and wine professionals that could use a bit more guidance into, say, in structure. Like, great, I know you like that wine. I know you like this wine region, but let's learn a bit more about that. What makes that wine what it is? Because that's what education in wine is really about. And I think if the Court of Master Sommeliers can evolve itself to be what the industry needs, it can be a much better organization than it ever was even in the past.
Sounds like, and it sounds like from what I'm hearing from that, Carlton, and overall today, is that despite some folks having dropped out, very publicly recently from the Court of Master Sommeliers, you all still see a tremendous value in it. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what I'm hearing today. And that, through the future movement of making it more inclusive through different marketing efforts, or just through other events or whatever it might be, that everyone will have access to this, and it is definitely worth the effort that you've all put in.
Oh yeah. I mean, just like those guys have evolved out of who they were. I mean, we all knew them pre-version of them, their current selves, how they've evolved. This organization will evolve. And I think it's very exciting to be a part of that. I like digging my heels in and building things and changing things and doing the work, whether it be in a company or whatever it is, a friendship. Like, I like that challenge. Like, to me, like, that's what I live for, whether it's building companies or whatever it is. It's like, to me, I thrive on that, and I think that, the industry needs a focus on education and knowledge now more so than ever, but it can't look the way it did before. I mean, I think I definitely won't speak for these guys, but me, what I hope to see is in the next 5 years is that the Court of Master Sommeliers looks nothing like it does now. It definitely champions education and championing quality service, but it can't look and feel the way it does right now, because it's not necessarily a reflection of what's going on in the wine industry. And that needs to change, because I think right now is the most exciting time in the wine industry in American history. The court was a big part of building that. And now we just need to move to the front of the line. But, and I think where a lot of, or those three guys who moved on really got confused is they somehow thought the court was there to service them, the way it's really not. The court is and we need to refresh that philosophy within the court. It's there to serve the students, right? So I actually don't care what the court is to me. I'm unimportant in the equation. I'm in the service of the students, right? In building the culture and taking that. That's why my favorite exam to teach is the introductory exam. I like getting them when they're really young and really excitable and super pumped. And that's the energy I like. And we just need to make sure that's maintained through all the levels, and that they understand that we're there to service them and mentor them. Because I really don't care what it is to me or even what my experience was in the past. It's about like moving it forward. And I think that, you know, when you look at the organizations, there's so many really great business people and bright minds. Like, I feel very confident that the changes can be made. But like with any organization, like it's only going to happen if the people within the organization want it to happen. And that's what we're pushing right now.
And I think you make a good point. People in the organization. I mean, you can stand outside of a building and scream at the boardroom, but nobody's going to hear you. I mean, you kind of have to be in it to change it.
Correct.
But Sabato, Bobby, Dustin.
I'm excited. I mean, again, going back to how I started, I think it's unfortunate we had to have this sort of wake up call, but now the onus is on us. And how do we impact change? And that's why I think all of us are here in this and wanting to be a part of that change and move it forward. So it's our opportunity to seize and carpe diem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to take a lot of work, but it's possible. And that's the best thing. It's possible. We don't have to tear it down all the way down. We just need to adjust and grow, and it's time to grow. And sometimes growth is uncomfortable, but that's okay. Let's get uncomfortable and make it better.
I think to what Bobby said too, in terms of a lot of people are saying things right now, and it's really hard to see action in this short of time in where the world is on pause and COVID and everything going on. But the true test is going to be what is our body of work? So if you're looking 6 months from now, a year from now, what have we done? Did we just put up a black square in a statement, or did we actually make change and impact change? And that's what I'm going to be most proud of when we can look at that body of work and share that and see the lives that we've impacted positively as a result of it.
Dustin, anything to add?
No, I mean, I agree. I think I'm reinvigorated, honestly, with the organization. I think as hard as it's been these last few weeks, and you know, we've kind of gone through some difficult times, I think I'm excited about what the future could potentially look like, and really hoping that I can do my part to be a part of that adjustment or the forward change. So just like Sab, I'm looking forward to seeing what this looks like in the long term. I don't think that any real work can get done in such a short amount of time. I think it needs to be a long-term, vision that gets put into place, and things need to happen. So I'm excited to help where I can and to see what that looks like in the coming time.
Well, I thank you all for joining today. I mean, Dustin and Sabato, you have to do this because I make you. But Bobby and Carlton, you certainly don't. And we know how valuable your time is. We certainly appreciate it. Just a great conversation today, and we look forward to keeping up with you as progress is made, and we know that it will be. Thank you, everybody, for joining and listening to the podcast, and of course, joining us on YouTube. I'm sorry, Sabato.
I have one more thing, a PSA, and it would be responsible not to put it out there, but we don't have all the answers, and I want to make myself available if anybody has suggestions on what we can do better, has questions about how they can shape their career. I want to raise my hand and say I'm happy to offer any type of insight that I can to you, and we'll be open to any suggestions and feedback. And as part of the diversity committee, want to make sure that we're listening to not just other master sommeliers, but people that are in the program or people that want to be in the program. So reach out on social media, slide in my DMs, and we'll love to set up a time to chat.
Wonderful.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Sabato. Again, thanks everyone for joining. It's important to us that you stick with us with the podcast, and we really appreciate that everybody has. Please give us a 5-star rating, like, share, tell your friends. Past episodes are up, not all of them yet, but they're all coming up, and then everything's available on YouTube. Again, Bobby, thank you so much. Carlton, thank you so much. Dustin, Sabato, as always. Love being here with you. I'm Mike Laszlo, and we really appreciate you being here with us on the Free Run. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to go jump on the floor.
All right.
I'm
Thanks,
gonna go
Bobby.
fall on the floor.
I can't do the studying for you. It's so good.
We're